Hey, this is Dr. Ben Whites, host of the Rational Wellness Podcast. I talk to the leading health and nutrition experts and researchers in the field to bring you the latest in cutting-edge health information. Subscribe to the Rational Wellness Podcast for weekly updates. And to learn more, check out my website, drwhites.com. Thanks for joining me, and let's jump into the podcast. Hello, Rational Wellness Podcasters. I'm very excited today to be speaking with Dr. Barrie Tan, and we'll be talking about tocotrienols and also about GG. Tocotrienols, many of us may not know what they are, but they are part of the vitamin E family, which consists of 8 fat-soluble isoforms: alpha, beta, gamma, and delta tocopherol, and alpha, beta, gamma, and delta tocotrienols. Most multivitamins and other nutritional supplements that contain vitamin E only contain alpha tocopherol, which is generally what is considered to be vitamin E in popular nomenclature. One of the better sources for research on vitamins, the Linus Pauling Institute's Micronutrient Information Center, in its detailed article on vitamin E, is almost exclusively about alpha tocopherol. And there's only one small paragraph about tocotrienols. So the word has not really gotten out. And that's one of the things we want to do today is get the word out about tocotrienols. Dr. Barrie Tan will be joining us today, and he has a PhD in chemistry. He's dedicated to researching vitamin E and related compounds, and he is or was previously an assistant professor at the University of Massachusetts. He's credited with discovering tocotrienols in palm, rice, and annatto, with annatto being the most efficient source, since palm and rice also contain substantial amounts of tocopherols. And alpha tocopherol, as we'll talk about, acts to inhibit tocotrienols. Dr. Tan produces annatto tocotrienols through his American River Nutrition Company. Dr. Tan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Ben. I look forward to being on your show and to your followers that listen to you. So I'm hoping that this will be a good time to disseminate information about vitamin E, which 20 years ago was at high point, and then it dipped down. Then vitamin D we talk about, and then now we talk about vitamin K. I'm hoping to bring back something of vitamin E that is long forgotten or not known. So hopefully this will...
The long forgotten fat-soluble vitamin.
Yes.
So I thought, since everybody likes a love story, perhaps you can tell us how you went down to South America and met one of the true loves of your life.
Yes, I went to South. Thank you. That's a wonderful thing. The year was 1994. And at the time, there was a Professor Johanna Seiden at Harvard Medical School. She was a ophthalmologist. She found out that in the back of the retina of the eye, where the fovea, the main point, have a lot of zeaxanthin. As they flank out the retina, have lutein, and of course, it filters the blue light to protect the retina. And today, of course, everybody know. Oh, Dr. Tan is talking about macular degeneration. I know about that, but remember, this is 1994. It was a while back like that, and then I knew there were giant marigold. So I went to South America, and this is a younger me with a little bit more hair like that. So you can see the giant marigold that I have. It was just like that. So, and this is by the way, this is in the Truth About Vitamin E book that later I can give you the link. You can download this free of charge. I did this as a labor of love to tell the story. But anyway, I did that. So when I went down to South America, I had already studied vitamin E now for 20 years. I was taking a break because of this unusual lutein and zeaxanthin thing. And truth has it, literally 20 feet away from me, I found this annatto plant. And the annatto plant is a beautiful plant that look like this. Look at how beautiful it is. If you touch this as it were, I'm doing it like that, it will stain your hand. Now, the color is carotene. And I know, and this is truly an Amazonian plant. Here, I took this in the botanical garden in Tampa, This is a very zoom in. The frog is about the size of a dime. So the seed is about the size of a grape seed. So this is a very tiny. It's called the Amazonian tree frog. So they here to keep themselves away from the element. All this to say, I discovered from this Amazonian plant. I thought that to protect the keratin, it would be some antioxidant like polyphenol. There are many polyphenol like that. To my surprise, it contained little to no polyphenol. So that's not the one that protect the color from degradation. And then I thought, then I found out that it only contained vitamin E. Surprisingly, and most surprisingly, it contained only tocotrienol free of tocopherol. Then I said, oh my goodness, I previously discovered tocotrienol from palm and rice that you mentioned. And palm and rice typically contain 25 to 50% tocopherol. So this plant containing free of tocopherol and only tocotrienol is unique in nature. I believe the plant makes the tocotrienol the two most potent vitamin E to protect the degradation of the color keratin so that it deceives the birds of the air and the animal thinking that the wonderful looking seed is actually a fruit, you see. It's actually a seed. And then they swallow the seed and therefore able to procreate. But if the color disappear, then you look brownish. It doesn't look like a fruit. Neither does it have the nice floral smell. That was it. It was an accidental find. Like much of my life, I am no smarter than any other scientist. I just happen to be in the right place at the right time. And for the audience to suggest that why this is so, as a chemist, there are more than 50 million chemicals documented by the American Chemical Society, and most people would tell story because they're medicine men. They go to this, that, and other place. Like, yes, I was in Amazonia, but it was an accidental thing. I did not go and nearly bitten to death by snake or mosquito like that. I just was looking for something for macular degeneration protection, which is lutein and zeaxanthin. I show you the picture, but this was literally 20 feet away. I saw this plant. My curiosity was aroused, and therefore I looked, and that was 1999, thereabouts. And so for the last 20 or 25 or so years, my time had been arrested. I returned back to tocotrienol, which I already previously have 20 years of experience in it. All told, I've been on tocotrienol now for almost 40 years, if not that. Thank you so much for allowing me to tell that story.
So how did we make this mistake and think that alpha tocopherol was really the most important vitamin E compound?
Okay, the mistake, if I can so call it, is because when we lock onto something, we tend hard to change. It's just kind of human nature, and if it's true of human being, it's probably also true of scientists. There, in the vitamin E, there are 4 tocopherols and 4 tocotrienol, and with the 4 Greek letter alpha, beta, delta, gamma, like that. So when in 1922, exactly 100 years ago, it is a very American affair. 2 a scientist, medical doctor at UC Berkeley, they discovered that vitamin E helped the fetus to go to full term. That was a discovery. Because it helped the fetus to full term, for that alone, it was therefore given the status of a vitamin. And they followed each of the letter, and the next letter was E. So vitamin E helped to bring the fetus to full term. However, in the process of knowing that, they found out that it protects the fetus from oxidative damage. And very quickly, they found out that this is found in plant. And they found in plant they're rich in vegetable oil and protect the vegetable oil from oxidation. So to this day, most people know vitamin E as an antioxidant, powerful antioxidant. And that antioxidant, and that additional vitamin E was alpha tocopherol. So we kind of like lock in on that, and then we move on. If I have time to tell you other story about vitamin K, about vitamin D, it's the same thing. We got locked into one and did not move on. Vitamin K would be classic. It was discovered as anti-clotting, and today much of the vitamin K activity is in menaquinone MK4. But let's say, so the tocotrienol piece was discovered about 40 years after alpha tocopherol. So it's almost a distant brother of vitamin E tocopherol that almost missed the chance of discovery. It was discovered by USDA and scientists at University of Liverpool, England. Together, they found that in rubber, to protect the rubber from oxidation. And then another 40 years later, I show up as a young assistant professor at University of Massachusetts stumbling on this. At that time, everybody was studying alpha tocopherol, but I was doing the path less traveled on tocotrienol. And then, as you know, towards the end of 1990s and 2000, and all the published study of alpha tocopherol came out nada. And came out even a negative for people. So I just thought, oh, will I be thrown away, the baby thrown away with the bathwater? I said, I hope not. But I persisted in tocotrienol. And now, 30 years later, thank God, my discovery of this from Anato is yielding solid fruit about tocotrienol. Properties of tocotrienol unshared by tocopherol. So I love to share this with your audience.
It's interesting. When I first saw those vitamin E studies, my first reaction was, well, they didn't give enough vitamin E. Then I realized that gamma tocopherol was really the form of tocopherol that was much more common in food and was actually more beneficial. So my next conclusion was the problem was that they were just giving alpha, and if they had given gamma or mixed tocopherols, then that would have been better. And now the story has evolved to learn that really it's tocotrienols that are much more beneficial for us.
Yes. Now, on the gamma tocopherol thing, in the plant, there is a case for gamma tocopherol. If you look into the plants, right, where else the discovery of alpha tocopherol is the vitamin, and where else alpha tocopherol helped the fetus to go to full term, all correct. However, in the plant, the most dominant vitamin E it produces is gamma tocopherol. It produces gamma tocopherol to protect the fat and the oil in the plant not to go bad, like in corn, because you have corn oil, like in soy, because you have soy oil like that, and then canola, many other things. So they are mostly gamma tocopherol, a few exceptions, but mostly gamma tocopherol. So now for tocotrienol in the plant is even rarer. Like that. But when we first did the study, people can synthesize the tocotrienol. So something about tocotrienol that is different. So while I'm at this, I might explain. If you think of a cell, the cell look like a bean shape like that. And all the constituent in the cell, like we know of, like mitochondria, the nucleus, and all these other things, it had to have the cell wall to contain the content we call organelles in the cell for the cell to function. Now, for the audience, simplistically, the major composition of the cell membrane is fatty acid. They need protection like mad. And you probably have interviewed people to take omega-3. Very good fat. And omega-3 is very unstable. When you take the omega-3, first it goes into blood. Eventually, it doesn't stay in the blood. Eventually, it stays in the cell membrane. And why is the cell membrane so important? The nucleus is the holy of holy. The mitochondria produce energy, and the other Golgi apparatus, endoplasmic reticulum. I know this is kind of like off. They make things your body needs when you make protein. They are required. So therefore, inside the cell is very well protected, and the cell membrane is a gated community. You want nutrients to go in, you want waste to go out. If the cell membrane is compromised, then life as we know it will age. That is, I call the aging process. Now, come back to the original thing again. The cell membrane is mostly fat. And the fat need antioxidant. Vitamin E is the kind of molecule that best can protect the integrity of the gated community. They have done study on this. There are many. I know the audience is bewildered with many words of antioxidant. I will cut it to the chase. If you learn this, I am grateful and I hope you are grateful. Everything people talk about is antioxidant, but I want to champion to you what is the critical antioxidant you care about. It's not like protecting ding ding or whatever other ding ding like that. If you put a stick of butter in the summertime, that's off smell. If you drive past a roadkill, that off smell, that first oxidation thing is fat. So as the same thing, the lowest lying fruit of oxidation is fat. Yes, protein oxidation is no good. Carbohydrate oxidation is no good. Nucleic acid, which is DNA oxidation, is no good. But none of them get oxidized so fast. The fastest thing to get oxidized is fat. So therefore, to protect the fat, if people remember the story of Massachusetts, they would be the Minuteman. The Minuteman will be the first to go off, and the Minuteman is tocotrienol. You want it to protect the fat because it'll be the first to go. So if you care about that,
now are tocotrienols better than gamma tocopherol as
yes.
a fat, as an antioxidant for fat?
Yeah, it's better in this way. The tocopherol tail. This is a vitamin E molecule. This one here, like that. And this is, if I block it, this OH, that's an antioxidant. And if I block it the other way, the tail, this is the tail here. If you look carefully on the tail, you see at 3-4 places the double bond. It looked like an O-ring, like my finger pointing here. That is double bond, and hence the word tri-in, 3 double bond. In tocopherol, the 3 double bond disappear. Therefore, a tocopherol tail is longer. All that to say, a tocopherol tail is longer, anchored deeper into the cell membrane. A tocotrienol tail is shorter, enter less deeper. So I am sure you hear this for the first time. A tocopherol would go around the cell membrane like this. Let's say 1 mile per hour. And the tocotrienol will go around the cell wall 50 times faster, like that. So to capture oxygen radical, to protect the fat from going bad. So therefore, a tocotrienol and tocopherol does the same job like a police to capture the bad guys. A tocopherol will be like a police person that stay in the confine of the town. A tocotrienol would be like a state trooper that will cross the entire state. So it covers a larger surface area faster. So if you got that, I have given you the simplistic understanding why tocotrienol is 50 times more potent than tocopherol, simply because the tail is slightly shorter. Thank you for asking, guys. Oftentimes I miss that if people don't ask me the question. Thank you, Ben.
So now I've heard you say multiple times in interviews that taking tocopherols inhibits tocotrienols. Now, a lot of multivitamins and other supplements contain some tocopherol. Is it okay to take a multi that maybe has a modest amount of tocopherol and also take a tocotrienol? Or is it okay, say, for example, to take your multi at one time and take your tocotrienols at another time? Or is it better to just get rid of any supplements that have tocopherols?
So your question has 3 layers. Personally, I have stopped taking tocopherol for the last 20, 30 years, and I'm still alive. Like that, nothing is happening to me. I would say the only
But have you brought a rat fetus to term?
And I have not done that. I use it sometimes as a joke also. If you think about that, if it is a vitamin, right, is to bring a fetus to full term, then men shouldn't have necessity to take it. I would say the only exception will be in a prenatal. then a person should have 100% IU of the vitamin E as alpha tocopherol. But the 100% RDA for vitamin E is about 15 milligram. Now keep that in mind. 15 milligram and 100%. But most people take 400 IU and 800 IU. That's insanely high amount like that. And 100% is merely 15, 20 IU like that. Now, if it is in a multi, if the multi has about 15 to 20 IU, and then one would take tocotrienol 100 to 200 milligram or higher, then the amount of tocotrienol would not be interfered by tocopherol. Personally, I would take a multi that only contain tocotrienol and Design for Health have such, they call it primal multi like that. And we are trying to convince more company to, it is pennies for them to replace it because the multivitamin is a long list of many other things. This is only one line something. But so when does the tocopherol interfere? When you take supplement of anywhere 100 IU and above, and most vitamin E is about 400 to 800 IU, then at 400 to 800 IU, the tocotrienol would not have a prayer to be absorbed. The alpha tocopherol would block the absorption, but not typically in a multi, and certainly I'm not discouraging a pregnant woman to not take a prenatal that the doctor would accept, because that was the reason why alpha tocopherol was first discovered.
Okay, let's get into the health benefits of tocotrienols. So I'd like to start with the big C because, as we know, that's a major killer for today and cancer rates are increasing. Can you explain how tocotrienols may help to prevent and may even be helpful as part of a treatment approach for cancer?
Yes. Before I said that, right, I started my career on tocotrienol on chronic conditions, and then in the 1990s, if you find out all the published work, about 90% of the published work will be in chronic condition, not cancer, and about 10% will be on cancer. And chronic conditions like prediabetes, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, fatty liver disease, lipidemia, and all these other things like that. And then as I went 20 years into it, I noticed that this will be in the 2000. 50% will be on chronic condition. 50% will be on cancer. It changed like that.
And of course, a lot of us now recognize cancer as a chronic condition as well.
Yes, it is. It is. So, and then it's so much study on this. And then I said, wow, there's nobody doing clinical study on cancer, and then the compelling reason on cancer. So we embarked about 10 years ago to engage into clinical trial. Now, when I do this for the audience purposes, to let you know that I'm not a pusher of sales like that. I am truly interested in science. If it bears out, you can go and read it. But how is a nutritional supplement allowed by the FDA for cancer prevention or cancer like that or treatment? It's not going to be allowed. But if I believe the scientific enterprise, and then as it happened in the Kingdom of Denmark, they decided to conduct 5 clinical trials, and now they've expanded it to 6 or 7 like that. I'm losing count. In the U.S., there's 1 on pancreatic cancer, and the 4 cancers that we study, some of them are repeat on different angles like that. Altogether 5. If you include the other one in Florida, then it will be 6. But the 4 in Denmark will be breast cancer, ovarian cancer, lung, and colon cancer. So those are the 4 cancer. And you ask for the mechanism, how it kills.
If you want to increase research in the United States, you need to have the drug companies patent some new form of tocotrienol that they can make billions off of.
I know.
Then the research will happen.
I know, and because this is a natural extract, they are not going to pump in any money on this. No. So I'm doing this for what it can do. and the audience can
Don't
read
worry, some drug company will come up with some way to combine it with some other compound and patent it.
And they probably, very well might. I have companies sometimes from time to time contacting us for this and another thing, but nothing materialized. So my goal is to push forward in it. So right now,
Okay.
I see two mechanisms that I believe, two or three I believe the strongest. There are many mechanisms how they think that this will kill cancer. One would be because the cancer cell multiplies, say, about 100 times faster than normal cell, they have certain connection. So it's like circuitry. They have certain, we call it cell signaling. So it's a circuitry that short chain it to get there faster. And so the tocotrienol is able to foul up the short chain. They cut it off so they cannot do this. So there's certain mechanism that do that.
Yeah, I was looking at an article and they mentioned the PI3K AKT pathway, the MAP kinase, and WNT signaling pathways.
Yeah, and all these kind of signaling pathway, right, allow certain application of the cell to multiply and increase ferociously much faster. So
Right.
therefore, if you can foul this thing up, you cut off the circuitry that make them grow better. That's it. Another one would be if this is already past that stage where the cell has become a tumor. So it's not a cancer cell. It's a cluster of cancer cells.
Which means you now have billions of cancer cells.
Yes, the billion of cancer cells. So it's a solid mass. Now, not all cancer are solid mass. Most cancer are. The cancer that are not solid mass would be like leukemia. But most other cancer is a solid mass. They stay put in the place. They can also metastasize, of course. So when you have a solid mass somewhere like that, they still have to grow. So in order to fuel its massive growth, it grow artery out of the tumor into the nearby artery to suck nutrient to feed it. So in this case, it's an aberrant, unusual plumbing job. That's it. So this artery is called angiogenesis, a growth of new artery. So a way to kill this is with anti-angiogenic drug. If you go to Amgen, and you can see they have anti-angiogenic drug. Angiogenesis is the growth of new artery. Anti-angiogenesis is to cut off, and tocotrienol function to cut off the artery angiogenesis to block the feeding tube to feed the tumor. So essentially starving the tumor to death. So if the tumor is already in place, you want to starve the tumor to death. So that is a second mechanism. And the third one is when the cell is multiplying so fast, they need a lot of cholesterol on the cell wall. It's well known. Cholesterol is on the cell wall. So, and tocotrienol inhibits cell wall cholesterol synthesis, and therefore it cannot furnish the cell wall, and therefore the multiplication of the cell it cannot grow fast. So those are the three mechanism I buy the most. But mostly when we saw in animal study, we saw the death of the cancer cell. We saw the shrinking of the tumor, and we also saw the reduction of metastasis of the tumor from the origin to other places. So those are just fantastic model mechanism for which we believe the tocotrienol work against cancer.
Now, obviously, there would not be any problems in a preventative approach, but in a treatment setting where a patient is undergoing chemo or radiation, it's well known that most oncologists and almost all radiation experts are going to tell their patients under no circumstances should you ever take any antioxidants because they will uncouple the therapy.
Yeah, that concept is in the US, and a few drugs are in that kind of a regime like that, we did not have problem. This was raised as a question. We did not have problem in arriving at the IRB. IRB means Institutional Review Board. You have to pass that stage to ethically approve the use of a certain medicine or supplement to mitigate a certain condition. And those 5 clinical studies done in Denmark were giving a patient with very high dose tocotrienol, 900 milligram, three capsule of 300 milligram for breakfast, for lunch, and dinner. They should be taken with a meal, have enough fat or oil so that they can emulsify and absorb properly. And now in none of those clinical studies did we ever see any contraindication or negative impact of the tocotrienol on those cancer patients. Now, before you move on, just for the audience purposes, every study has a context. When we did this study in Denmark, they were not studying a stage 1 and 2 cancer patient. We were studying stage 3 and 4 cancer patient, which means that the cancer have already metastasized. In stage 4, it even gone the last stage, which means that there are no available options given, so that the patient is under palliative care. So therefore, they are taken standard of care with the anti-angiogenic drugs, and in the other study, standard of care and with tocotrienol. That's the only study. If you're interested, I'll tell you briefly what the study is. So be like this. So in other words, they are not based on people with stage 1 and 2 with many options available, operative, radiation, and chemo. On the stage 4, only chemo is allowed because you barely, they are so ill, you cannot operate anymore. So there are no options available except for chemo.
And that study's already been published?
That study is published, and the shorthand is this. Because they're stage 4 on the ovarian cancer, on standard of care, after 6 months, there are no more patients. They're gone. And then in the standard of care with tocotrienol, after 6 months, 60% still survive. Were this to be a medicine? Now, so wow, they didn't save all. Correct. We're talking about patient with stage 4. If this were to be a medicine, this will hit the Wall Street already, but it isn't.
So multi-billion-dollar drug, absolutely.
And then even after 24 months, 24% still survive. So we consider this to be a significant place. The tocotrienol is making an impact to a situation that is not good at the very end stage of a person's life.
A cancer drug is considered successful in a clinical trial if it extends life by 3 months.
I know. You are right. Thank you for providing that knowledge. So right now, we are trying to do other upgraded study, but as the audience know, and I know sometimes when people have conditions like this, we're impatient, and I fully understand. But we are a small company and not a pharmaceutical company. The fact that we can even do study like this is intended. I do this. We don't want to be a snake oil company. We just simply want to do this, and then the audience will know this. We will never be able to say on any bottle. So if you want to have, so if I have blah, 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 this and that, should I be taking? I cannot advise you on this.
Right.
But if you go on our website, we will tell you all the different studies have been done. They are literally about more than 500, possibly close to 1,000 published study in animal study on about 300 to 400 cancer, how tocotrienol work to kill the cancer. Oh, by the way, and all the tocotrienol that kill the cancer, alpha tocopherol just about didn't work. And the top 2 vitamin E that do work are delta and gamma tocotrienol, and the one that worked the best is delta tocotrienol. Now that having said that, right, we have a machine that when we study from this annatto plant that we extract from this annatto plant here, typically when you run the machine, they will have 4 or 5 peaks. They'll have a mixture of tocopherol and a mixture of tocotrienol. And most of the time, it will have more tocopherol and than tocotrienol, like in palm and annatto. You see, 25 to 50% tocopherol, and then the other 50 to 75% tocotrienol. When you do this spectrum to read on tocopherol, it will look like this. It would have this one here, of the color in the background. This will be delta tocotrienol. Then it would have this amount of gamma tocotrienol. And then where the tocopherol is nothing, just like that. So it's 90% delta, 10% gamma. So therefore, annatto contain almost the most active vitamin E that have been ever studied like this. So to us, it's not a surprise, which is why Denmark decided to study this. And the pancreatic cancer done in University of Southern Florida in Tampa also was using pure delta tocotrienol on cancer.
Okay. Just in case if anybody's parsing the words, I think when you were explaining that, you meant to say if you look at palm or rice, you'll see that there's a combination of tocopherol and tocotrienol, but only in annatto is it almost exclusively tocotrienols.
Yes,
okay.
Thank you.
Okay,
yeah.
And then I saw somewhere where you said that or there was an article or something that tocotrienols help to counter some of the side effects of radiation.
Yes, those studies were done by the U.S. Armed Forces. Very interesting. If the audience want to read about that, you go to AFRRI. It just acronized for Armed Forces Radiation and Radiobiology and Radiation Institute. So this is inside the Uniformed Services University in Maryland. This is a place that the U.S. government are not training soldiers. This is a place the U.S. government are training our armed forces to get master's and PhD degrees. So why did I mention that? It was during the Iraq War. I'm not making a political statement. I'm just trying to give you the fact. During the Iraq War, President Bush said that it was axis of mass destruction in Iraq. It's like that. And as it turned out, it wasn't. Our armed forces are doing research. If our army were to go to a hot spot, most of the time they'll never come back out alive because they'll be radiated to death. Like that. Just like in Fukushima, except that was a tsunami type situation. So the armed forces is wanting to do research study. What would be supplement or medicine they can take to protect, like a shield for them? And they study hundreds and hundreds of different compounds. And I kid you not. And of the hundreds of different compounds, in the short list of 6 is delta and gamma tocotrienol. If you type AFRRI or Uniformed Services University, and you type tocotrienol and radiation protection, you'll be able to find all the stuff. We did nothing. We only provided the pure gamma tocotrienol and pure delta tocotrienol.
It'd be interesting to see if it has some benefits for patients getting targeted radiation for cancer, because that has a lot of devastating side effects.
Yes, my gut feeling it is that it has. They do not study that. They clearly told me that we are doing. He said that's an important concern. He said we do not study civilian who have cancer. Right. We study armed forces, but because they study in so severe situation as opposed to that is total body radiation, and this is targeted radiation. And I'm still trying to find an oncologist, a radiation oncologist that can help me to do this study. To date, we're not as successful in finding. If I could, then I would go down that road.
So let's talk about the role of tocotrienols for preventing and reversing cardiovascular disease.
Okay.
This is obviously the number one killer in the United States and around the world.
And yeah, the first study in this, Ben, was in lower cholesterol. It was done in the mid 80s. And then I followed through, and as we were studying, it did lower cholesterol. And then we got stumbled on 10 years delay because we didn't know that alpha tocopherol would interfere, and it did. So we have to figure out that. And we figure it out, we pick up from where we left and continue on that. And when we continue, we notice the cholesterol lower, but even more dramatically, the triglyceride lower more. Now, it's still cardiovascular disease, but the triglyceride lowering is peculiar to people with metabolic syndrome, meaning that the triglyceride lower has to do with people with diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and fatty liver. How do we come up to that? Before it was called metabolic syndrome, Ben, it was called syndrome X. If you were around in the 1990s, it was called syndrome X because it was a sexy phrase because we have the movie and then the X file, this and that. So they made syndrome X. So in the syndrome X, they just noticed that the sugar is moderately high, but not high enough to be diabetes. The triglyceride is high, but not high enough to make people really sick, but it bothers people on this condition. I met the professor who came up with metabolic syndrome. His name is Gerald Reaven, Reaven. You can Google him from Stanford. He did all this clinical study. His shorthand answer is this. I met him one time. He was catching a plane. He didn't want to be disturbed. I was really an impediment to him going to the airport, but he just gave me the shorthand. And even though he gave me the short, I never forgot what he said. I'll say it exactly what he said, and then I shorten it for you. He said, hypertriglyceridemia precedes hyperglycemia. That means high triglyceride precedes high sugar. So you do not have type 2 diabetes until you have high triglyceride and you cannot contain the high triglyceride. The floodgates open and the sugar shoots up, and then you have diabetes. So hypertriglyceridemia then is a hallmark of metabolic syndrome. So that was, and then remember, I accidentally got into this because I noticed that the triglyceride in people with high cholesterol, the triglyceride dropped. Then I said, wait a minute, why does a high triglyceride drop? Then I noticed, oh my goodness, this high triglyceride drop addresses metabolic syndrome. So I went after it hardcore. So I used Tocotrienol to study pre-diabetes, worked. I used it to study diabetes, worked. And then that was when I finally, in the last 8 years, I went hard after people with fatty liver disease. For fatty liver is a silent disease, no pain, no nothing until the doctor find out that you have high triglyceride, jaundice or whatever in the liver. About 25 to 30 million Americans have fatty liver, NAFLD. Non-alcohol fatty liver disease, and it's such an awkward phrase. All that to say, the liver, when you study them, you have a biopsies, they look like people with alcohol cirrhosis. Who would have guessed 30, 40 years today, our liver can be damaged by our bad diet exactly as alcohol would destroy the liver.
Absolutely. No, this has been talked about. This is a major pandemic that nobody's really thinking about, but this is in large part related to our consumption of refined carbohydrates and sugar. And we're going to end up with a tsunami of patients needing liver transplants, and we got to do something about this.
And then, the tsunami of liver transplant, Ben, is not sustainable, because you have 90 million people. If they all need liver transplant, you simply will not have 90 million livers available live. We had it managed when we have alcohol cirrhosis for liver transplant. But right, who would have guessed, right? I had thought this numerous times. When people abuse the liver with excess of alcohol, now we are saying you can do this to the liver by carbohydrate, refined carb, and high-fat diet, exactly as alcohol can do. It's a stunning, and this is only discovered in Mayo Clinic. I was in Minneapolis this past weekend, discovered in Minneapolis in the 1980s. It was not long ago when the doctor said that, Mr. Jones, do you drink alcohol? Because they read the thing, and Mr. Jones said no. And then he went back to look at the data and come back. Are you sure you did not drink alcohol? And now Mrs. Jones feel accused, They said, no, I do not drink alcohol. That was when the phrase non-alcohol fatty liver disease was discovered. So in the last 8 years, I want to really tell you the study. In the last 8, it took me 8 years, ladies and gentlemen, to do it. We did fatty liver because we went for the big one like that. First, we did a 3-month study. Then we did a 6-month study. And finally, we did a 12-month study. We give the same dose. So this is a time dependent. They are different patients. So the 3-month study, we were studying, it did the liver enzyme drop. So we were happy. So in the 6-month study, we continue to study whatever we study. We published a 3-month study. And then 6-month study, the liver enzyme drop. Now we study, did the inflammation drop? And then did the fat remove from the liver? We use ultrasound, the fat removed from the liver. Then we also study, did the sugar in the blood drop a little bit? And then the triglyceride drop a little bit. So definitely is back out of kilter, back into balance again. Something else also dropped, but I wasn't then I decided that because it's the largest organ in the body, I need to know if it's sustainable after 12 months. So we did the 12-month study, which is really long. And the 12-month study is finished, and we just published last week. So the 3-month study published, the 6-month study published, and 12-month study published. So this is actual. In the 12-month study, all the other things I said before also dropped. This time, we use a CAT scan to understand if the fibrosis, if the fat is stored in the liver too much, they become fibrotic, which means they have scarring tissue. And generally, hepatologists, people who see scarring tissue is not reversible, which means the NAFLD will go to NASH. NASH, it just acronymized for non-alcohol steatohepatitis. So they begin fibrotic like that, not good. So we saw either the containment of the fibrosis or the reversal of the fibrosis. We saw that also. My chief science director told me, he said, Barrie, did you notice that in the 3 months and the 6 months something else? I didn't want to pay attention to it, but it was reversed, reduced, sustained, and statistically relevant. And then that is weight loss. I did not want to mention weight loss because if you tell the public weight loss, they're going to expect something is going to happen in 2 weeks and 4 weeks. We never had a study 2 to 4 weeks. It would be insane to see the liver have something happen in weight. It would be a total waste of a study. But we had a study at 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months. So now I have to report, and truth be told, statistically significant, in 3, 6, and 12 months, the patient with fatty liver disease have weight loss and sustain about 10 to 15 pounds, approximately 5% of the body weight. I am floored. So I have to report this. I did not set up the study for weight loss. You can see.
So, Dr. Tan, this is incredible news about tocotrienols. But unfortunately, some of those patients were probably taking their tocotrienols after they had their Big Mac and fries. Can we repeat this study and put people on a healthy diet and exercise as well? And this shows why it's absolutely crucial if we're going to do something about the chronic disease burden in this country that we focus on prevention.
Yes, please do, because as you know, I'm so skittish about talking about weight loss. In normal, healthy people, this did not happen. Neither did we find this in the cancer patient. But in people with fatty liver, they are most certainly to be overweight. Not sure if they're obese, but they're overweight. And losing weight for people who are overweight is nothing to sneeze at, regardless. And by the way, on this subject, we are now doing a study in Texas. They are not fatty liver patients, but they are obese patients, men and women. It's ongoing. We will know that by the end of next year. I'll report to you for people to have no NAFLD, but they are obese. What would happen to them? I don't know yet. But for now, I am good enough to say at 3, 6, and 12 months with fatty liver people, they lose approximately 5% or less of their body weight. So, but mostly I believe that
let's keep going on the on cardiovascular disease a little more. The tocotrienols also inhibit the LDL cholesterol synthesis in the liver, and I saw that it can even potentially be beneficial for reducing lipoprotein A, which is a particularly atherogenic particle and quite challenging to try to reduce.
Yes. We haven't done too much with LP little a, sometimes people call them, because it's atherogenic particle like that. I have genetic hypercholesterolemia. I am a 5'4" Asian man, and typical, not tall by any measure, and I'm 125 pounds. So I am not otherwise. So you would think that my cholesterol would be normal, but I have genetic hypercholesterolemia. So I take tocotrienol like that, and it moderately reduced my cholesterol. I'm still on statin drugs, and I'll come back to see about on the GGPs. But I noticed that my LP little a certainly is low and in check. So I'm very pleased. And also they have another measurement, buoyant LDL and dense LDL. And dense LDL is more atherogenic, which have a lot more LP little a. And the buoyant LDL is less atherogenic. And most of my LDL is in the buoyant LDL. So those specific nuance.
Yeah, people sometimes refer to it as small dense LDL or large fluffy LDL.
And mine is mostly the fluffy LDL, which have very little LP little a. So therefore, the nuance part is also supported besides the LDL being dropped. So that would help me in the atherogenic thing, keeping my fingers crossed. So
that's great. Excellent. And is there a synergistic effect of using, say, tocotrienols with, say, natural agents to help manage cholesterol? Like I've often been using tocotrienols along with red yeast rice and or niacin as part of a natural LDL managing program.
Yes. If it is red yeast rice, if small amount of monocolin that mimic that of a statin, and if you don't have muscle problem, taking red yeast rice is fine. Some people have genetic disposition to them, and that would also work on it. Niacin love to drop triglyceride. And so it's also good if you don't have a red lobster flush, I call it, then you'll be fine like that. So now I found that tocotrienol also lower triglyceride dramatically, very good. So therefore, you should include in your dossier of using niacin if it does not give you the red flush, and red yeast rice if it doesn't give you muscle problem, to include tocotrienol. They have no known side effect. The tocotrienol particularly is good to reduce inflammation. It's just really a fantastic thing to take. So if you would be a normal person without any of this condition, an antioxidant use of tocotrienol would be called for.
So dosage for a patient with cardiovascular risk factors like elevated small dense LDL and lipoprotein A, et cetera, would it be 300 milligrams? Would it be 600 milligrams?
I would put it this way, Ben. Good question. This is a protocol thing. If a person is squeaky clean with no this and that other condition, just using it as an antioxidant. Remember at the beginning of the talk, I said you have to protect the cell wall from oxidation. Then
Right.
1 to 200 milligram would be just fine, like that. So for normal antioxidant protection. If a person has mild chronic condition like pre-diabetes, this and that, some of the studies that we have done would be probably from 200 to 300 milligram, like that. They'll be good, and 400 milligram depending on the weight of the person. Otherwise, 2 to 300 milligram will be good. If a person have a severe chronic condition, and I show you some of the clinical trial, fatty liver that we use, they use 600 milligram, and the cancer trial we use 900 milligram. We don't really encourage people to take the 900 milligram, keeping only in mind we did the 900 milligram because they were stage 4 cancer patient. So in any other condition that considers serious, probably 4 to 600 milligram would be fine. So that would be my dossier for indicated from clinical study that we have.
And I guess there's even some animal research showing that it may reverse arterial sclerosis.
Yes, in the animal study, it clearly reversed arteriosclerosis. We saw that in a study we done in 2000 that the tocotrienol reversed carotid arteriosclerosis on a carotid artery here like that. But yes, we saw that, and we did not have a study. The closest we can do a study like that would be calcification arteriosclerosis, but we don't have a study such as that. So in animal study, yes, there are at least 4 to 6 different studies showing that kind of reversal of arteriosclerosis.
I'm pretty much out of time, but I'd like to see if we could just real quickly say something about bone health and then wrap it up.
Okay, bone health. We have a study with tocotrienol with bone health. It reduces the loss of bone in postmenopausal women with osteopenia, and we published that also. They were taking 300 and 600 milligrams. So if it's osteopenic, 300 milligram would be satisfactory. 600 milligram would be more on osteoporosis. Maybe another time, when you get to interview me, after I extract the tocotrienol, we also found another compound that is endogenous in the body called GG, geranyl GG, and like that. If I were to move away from my chair, that is the molecule of GG here. In the background is a long molecule of CoQ10. This is endogenous molecule. Our body makes it. If you take this, it will help our body, is required in our body to make CoQ10. It also helps in our body to make MK4, menoquinone 4, that will make stronger bone, and also help in our body to make muscle, skeletal muscle protein. Hopefully, you will interview me in another half year, a year from now. Would love to talk to you. That is very exciting. It's an endogenous compound. It's meant to be in our body to do that, and now we have a supplement. By the way, we are not
I'm
making
sorry,
it in
Dr.
ding-dong
Tan.
cases
I know
outside.
we talked about wanting to talk about GG as part of this discussion. Unfortunately, I've got to get my first patient of the day. So
okay, no problem.
But I would love to do another interview with you and talk about GG.
Yeah, come to my website and download the book. It's The Truth About Vitamin E. It's barrietan.com/book, and then you can download the book, and hopefully we will connect again at another time. And then blessing to you all, good health, and have a wonderful.
Are you going to the Designs for Health seminar in Orlando?
Yes, I will be. Will you be going?
I'm going. So I'll look. Yeah, so look for me there. I'll say hello to you.
Dr. Weiss, I will look
Grab
for you.
a cup of coffee or something.
Yeah, we'll
Okay.
do. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tan. Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for making it all the way through this episode of the Rational Wellness Podcast. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please go to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star ratings and review. That way, more people will be able to find this Rational Wellness Podcast when they're searching for health podcasts. And I wanted to let everybody know that I do now have a few openings for new nutritional consultations for patients at my Santa Monica White Sports Chiropractic and Nutrition Clinic. So if you're interested, please call my office, 310-395-3111, and sign up for one of the few remaining slots for a comprehensive nutritional consultation with Dr. Ben Weitz. Thank you, and see you next week.